Welcome to the Monday Monologue. And this is a interesting thing I've been working on this week. Long awaited, the real Budget 300B. And this is kind of a culmination of building a lot of different 300B amps over the years, and I'm really trying to find everywhere that I feel like I can cut costs on building this without negatively impacting the sound. And I'm not going to pretend like there's going to be no difference between, a $2,200 approximately is the price point I'm trying to hit. Might be a little lower. We'll see where the parts all come out to. 300B amp and a $3,600 one that's going to have Tango transformers and dual rail power supply and audio note components inside it. They're obviously they can't sound the same, but I can't put those kind of parts in an amp like this and have the extra complication circuitry and stuff and still keep the price down. It's not just replacing the transformers with something cheaper. That's not going to get us there. And so I'm trying to limit the capacitance in the power supply to reduce the cost of the caps. And I know you guys are going to maybe say, oh, well, a bigger cap's only $5 more, but that's how it gets out of control price-wise. You go, well, it's only $5, that's only $5. The next thing you know, you got $100 worth more parts in it. And so the other reason to do that is I want to try to make this where any rectifier tube will work in it. And you don't have to go hunt down some new old stock rectifier because we got a ton of capacitance with a dual rail supply that is going to tax new production 5AR4 rectifier tubes. And so, being able to use budget conscious tubes in it is also part of the equation. I'm hoping that this thing, I can voice it where it's going to sound good with a set of PS Vane Horizon 300B and 6S and 7 tubes. And we'll have to see what kind of rectifier tube we end up using. Probably going to be a 5AR4 to try to get the B plus up. These output transformers are from Musical Power Supply. And yeah, they're not giant transformers that have a ton of iron in them. But in the testing we did with the 2A3 amp, they performed really well. So hopefully this thing is going to sound good enough at this low price point where I'm comfortable putting my branding on it. And, guys, if I can't get it to sound good enough, we'll just figure out something else or just say I'm just not doing that. Anyway, that's kind of what I've been fighting with this week, is trying to figure out how to do this at as minimal cost as possible. And I think we're going to be able to do it. I'm going to use like a blue velvet volume control instead of an audio note. And just all kinds of little things like that. But anyway, one of my frustrations has been with cheap parts. And for example, this DP-DT switch. A good one is about $5 or $6, around in that range. And I saw on Amazon they had some DP-DT switches where you got 10 of them for $12 or something like that. And I was like, okay, that's cool. You get, they're $2 instead of $6. There's a little cost savings there. And so when they came in, I attempted to solder some leads onto them, and the plastic that they make them out of is not heat proof at all. I mean, as soon as you touch, and there's solder lugs on them. That's not like, these are designed to be soldered onto. As soon as I touch the soldering onto it, the plastic just melts and the lug just fell out of the switch. And it's like, that's junk. And then I went and read the reviews on Amazon. There's hundreds of bad reviews for these things where people found out the same way I did, that they bought this thing and tried to solder the wires onto it. And I know how to solder. You guys have seen me solder before. And as soon as you just get near it with some heat, the plastic starts melting. And it's like, that's not even a usable part. It doesn't matter how reasonable or cheap it is. If it's that poorly made where you can't even solder a wire on it, it's junk. And I ran into the same thing with these tube sockets. And I have been using these Amphenol new old stock tube sockets when I'm using this kind that has the retaining ring on them. Now, Belton does make really nice new tube sockets, but they don't make this style that has the little notches and it's got the place for the retaining ring, which these chassis that I'm having prefabbed have the little notch, and they're made for these kind where you don't have visible hardware, and I like that. Plus you can index them. You know, the 8-pin ones have like 8 index places on them, and you can, you know, index them however you need to get the wires to come out in the right places. Like, that's really cool. And so I saw these on Tubes and More, and several other of the tube vendor folks sell these new production ones, and I'm sure they're made in China. And the first thing is they fit in the hole a little sloppy, and I'm like, that's not the end of the world, right? And I mean, this is the standard, and I mean, they have chassis punches made in this size with the little notch in them specifically for these type tube sockets. So why wouldn't you make a new one to this standard? But, you know, they wiggle around maybe a 1/16 of an inch, but I'm thinking, well, when you put the retaining ring on them, they're going to be fine. So I put the retaining ring on it, and then one side would fall through if you pushed on it or pulled on it, and then you could kind of foots around with it, and the little retaining ring would like just going down into the hole. And I'm like, what's going on with this? So then I started measuring things, and this groove here that the retaining ring goes into is about 100 thousandths too deep. And so when you put the retaining ring on it, it goes in too far and not enough of the ring is sticking out, and it just falls down into the hole. It's like, oh my God. And I ordered like 20 of these. And so I did figure out that I could get a little strip of plastic and glue it down in the bottom of the groove, you know, all the way around it, and that would hold the ring out far enough where then the socket would stay in the chassis and fit and be usable. But come on, guys, that's just a super pain to have to basically remanufacture or repair these things before you can even put them in use. And, you know, again, I'm struggling to find a good source where I could buy quantities of the new old stock Amphenol ones, and occasionally they'll show up on eBay at a fairly reasonable price. And, you know, I hate buying, you know, when people have one or two of them and they want $5 shipping, that quickly gets out of hand. And sometimes I see somebody will have like 10 of them for sale and they want $20 a piece for them. It's like, they're not worth that. And I don't think they are. And so, anyway, so then I spent a bunch of time on the auction sites trying to find decent parts to use in these amps because the new ones are junk. And it's just frustrating. And then I tell you guys, like, you go, like, where's the bomb? And it's like, some of this stuff you're just going to have to find it wherever you can because there isn't a place to go buy it new. And that's frustrating for me, and I know for you too. So that's kind of my rant for this week is junk parts. And like I had a viewer that bought one of those Musishare, I think it's an X9, the 300B, and whatever tube sockets they're using, I think they're using those little pinch kind instead of the ones that, you know, like this that really grab the pins, and the tubes, you know, are pretty tight in the socket. And it's like he wiggles the amp like this and the tube's just going like this. And like you said, you just touch it and the tube pops out. And they're probably running into the same thing, that they can't find good parts either. And so they're just having to use the China junk and build amps that hopefully the tubes don't fall out of. And so I think everybody's struggling with that. And it gets down to trying to hit some magic price point that isn't realistic. And that's, I'm struggling with this because I'm doing things that aren't best practices or aren't like the best quality. But to hit that price point, that's what you have to do. And some of you may be saying, well, why are you putting these little fancy rings on it? Well, the chassis are pre-drilled for them. And so if I didn't put these on there would just be holes, screw heads filling up the blank holes. And again, I don't want to give up the quality that I feel like my stuff, when it's got my name on it, should have. But anyway, I'm sure some of you struggle with the same thing, trying to get budget kind of stuff done. And I know we all have got a threshold of like what we're willing to pay and what we're willing to spend on this hobby. And yeah, it is what it is. So anyway, that's what I've been doing this week, is working on this little project. I'm waiting on some parts. The guy that I'm building the Ultra 300B, that he said, he didn't say price is no object, but he said let's don't be cheap either. And he's building a really cool chassis for me to build the amp into. And we got to go over how we're going to do the fab work on the top plate and how we're going to finish that. We may get some kind of cool copper looking powder coat done on it, kind of a one-off deal. And I think it's going to be really awesome looking. And he did like some really cool inlay on the front of it. And I think y'all are going to be blown away when you see this thing. So that's on its way. I've got all the iron to build that. I've got a couple of 2A3s that have been commissioned that I'm working on. And these I'm doing with the Tango FC12S's, which is kind of a mid price point that really I think is a good spot. It's, I can't say that it's going to sound just as good as using the 30 waters, but they're $1,200 now, and they're just going up between the yen versus the dollar and tariffs and shipping costs, and it's just, the stuff's going to get expensive, guys. And somebody was warning me, and this wouldn't be a surprise at all, that as these electric cars and stuff get more popular, there's a lot of copper that goes into the electric motors and stuff in these electric cars, and the price of copper is probably going to go way up. And when it does, the price of all this stuff is going to go way up. And so maybe now's the time to do something if you're going to ever do it. I could see in another 12 months possibly some of these amps being $500 or $1,000 more across the board, no matter who's making them. Because unless you're just skimping on quality, there's no way to offset what all these other fixed costs are going to be. The other thing I'm really excited about is Holger at Earnhardt Audio is almost finished with my tape head preamp, and we'll be reviewing that soon and figuring out how to direct wire up the tape heads to an output jack and all that stuff. And that should be a really fun, I know probably not a lot of you guys are into reel-to-reel stuff, but that's going to be fun. The other thing that he turned me on to is, I know some of you folks have been asking for XLR or balanced inputs on my amps, and he's got a balancing transformer. I mean, you don't want to use like XLR to RCA cables. That's just like dumbing down the whole purpose of having XLR balanced cables. And These are high quality Lundell balancing transformers that are made for pro audio use that connect the balance to the single ended input that these tube amps need. And so I'm going to be looking at, how those might fit in my amps for special orders. And it's not going to be like RCAs and balanced. You need to pick one or the other. I don't know if there's room in the back of the amp for all that stuff. And these transformers take up a little bit of room. So anyway, that's a neat little thing. And I'll be going over those when those come in. I've still got the transformers coming for the headphone amplifier. First, we're going to do a 2A3 one. And then you guys have been asking for a 45 tube amp. I'm thinking into next year, I'm going to try doing a 45 headphone amp. I think that really fits what would be usable to a lot of people, and you'd really get some enjoyment from those 45 tubes that I've never listened to any, but I've had people tell me they're really nice. And so I need to hunt down some nice 45 tubes, and I'm not sure I'm going to try with the Globe ones. Those look like they're pretty expensive, but hey, we may end up doing that anyway. But anyway, that's in the works, and Thermionic Labs is sending me a pair of those. They've got some really neat headphone-specific output transformers. And then I think I said that somebody's bought my KT120 monos, so I'm going to build another pair of those for myself. Thermionic Labs is selling me some transformers and stuff, so that's going to be fun. And again, Holger's at Earnhardt Audio is getting me some of these headphone transformers and some other stuff to play with in the future. So we're going to be playing around more with some Lundell iron, especially the interstage transformers and that sort of thing. I think that's going to be some things to play with in the future. So anyway, I think that kind of is it for the Monday monologue. Hope you've enjoyed this content. Oh, I got some music. My friend, he's Oak Mountain Man on the channel. He was the guy that gave me that pair of Clips choruses. Thank you again for that. And then he sent this for my birthday. And I don't know if you guys have ever listened to Till Bronner. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right. I'm sure somebody will correct me. This is a fun album. I love all of his music. And this 2-album set, I think this was just released. But thanks to Oak Mountain Man for this. If you've never heard Till, check out some of his music. And if you're a vinyl head like me, yeah, this is good. It's recorded super well. It's got really good dynamics and nice, clean, no surface noise vinyl, and just a pleasure to listen to. So thanks again for my birthday present. So anyway, like I said, I think it's a good place to wrap up this video. Hope y'all have a nice Thanksgiving, and we will see you next week for the Monday monologue.